Baruch Hashem, Boker Tov. Today's Daf Yomi is Zevachim 98, Tzadi Ches. So we're actually in the middle of a brisa, and the brisa is telling us how we can learn out from a pasuk. Shmuel citing a brisa, and from this brisa we learn out laws for all the sacrifices from the pasuk, which mentions every sacrifice, and from there he learns out laws for all of the sacrifices. So we're on top of 98a on the second line. Jeff, you want to make sure Richard's on the right page with us? So the Gemara says we're going to go through what we learned from every single thing. Chatas. What do we learn out from the chatas? The fact that the pasuk refers to the sin offering. It tells us the following halacha: Ma chatas miskadeshes bibalua af kol miskadeshes balua. So it teaches us that just like the chatas, if it's the sin offering, if it touches another korban and the flavor of the chatas is absorbed, whatever it touches, whether it's another korban or another piece of meat, that if that flavor of the chatas is absorbed into it, it has the holiness of the chatas. So too, any korban that touches something else and that flavor is absorbed, it has the holiness of that korban. Asham, what do we learn out from the asham in that pasuk? Ma asham ein shafir v'shilya kadosh. Asham is a male offering. So males don't have fetuses or amniotic sacs. So just like an asham, the fetus and the amniotic sac is not considered sacred, because there is none. Af kol ein shfir v'shilya kadosh bo. So too, every korban, if it has a fetus and an amniotic sac, it's not considered sacred. Kasavar, you had a question? They're about to wait one more sentence. Because Savar, and the basis of this assumption is twofold. Kasavar v'lados kachim b'aviyasonheim kedoshim. The first thing is that the fetuses, they only get the sacred, they're only considered sacred when they are born, but not when they're in the womb. And number two, dan in efshar misha'i efshar, that you're able to arrive at something that would be possible, even though the source law for that is something that's impossible. In this case, you learn about female animals who have fetuses from the case of a male animal which doesn't have a fetus. Now, you had a question, Bill? That's why I said just wait 1 second. What do we learn out from the verse miluim? The miluim, ma miluim mosreihen. And now there's a difference of way to read this, but we'll go with Rashi. Just like the miluim refers to the week in which Aaron and his sons inaugurated the temple through their sacrifices, and there were no leftover animals. So there we learned from there, the same logic, mosreihen b'sreifa, that if there's leftover meat from the offering that gets burnt, the aim balechayim the mosreihen. But if there's an extra living animal, meaning not all they separated more than one korban for this more than one animal for this korban, then that doesn't get burnt. Af kol mosreihen b'sreifa ve'aim balechayim b'mosreihen. So we learn from here that if there's an extra living animal from that korban, it doesn't get burnt like the korban. There's different halachos applying to it. Either it grazes or it gets put in the pen to die, but it doesn't get burnt. What did we learn from the Shlomim? Ma Shlomim mefaglin umitzpaglin. This takes us back all the way back to the beginning of the tract, the laws of Pigol, back on 28b. We had like 15 days on it. Just like Shlomim can become Pigol and can make something else Pigol, its libations. Afkol mefaglin umitzpaglin. So too, that's the law by every animal, by every korban. But then there was a different version of this story, of this price. A different version of this price in the name of Rabbi Akiva, mincha. Ma mincha. What do we learn from the mincha? Ma mincha. You see, the first time, what did we learn from a mincha? That we learned that the korban is eaten by the male kohanim. But now, according to this version of the price, we learn ma mincha miskadeshes bebeluah, kol miskadeshes bebeluah. That just like the mincha, if it touches something, it transmits its taste. Also, to all the sacred animals do that. All the sacred offerings, if it imparts its flavor. So so we need to have this law taught according to Rabbi Akiva, both by the chatos and by the mincha. The mincha is the grain offering. The chatos is a meat offering. Mincha chatos. It needs to be taught by both. The iashmin mincha, if it was just taught by the mincha, we would say the ID derekika mivlav. Because the mincha is bread, it's soft. That's why its flavor is imparted. Avochatas, emelo, but the chatas, I might not say that because the chatas is not soft, so maybe it's not flavor is not imparted that way. The emelo and the mina chatas, and if we would do it by the chatas, I would say mishum the courier because the meat is very fatty, so it's very thick, so therefore it can give off it's strong, so give off its flavor. But by the chatas, mincha emalo. But by the mincha, I might not think that's tzricha. So that's what I need by both. What do we learn from the chatas according to Rabbi Akiva? Ma chatas ina ba'ol min achulin ubiyom ubiyadu ayaminis. That just like the chatas only comes from the chulin. What does that mean? The chatas is only brought from your money that was not meiser money, not from tithed money, but only from untithed money to the sin offering, and also ubiyom, and also the chatos can only be brought as an offering during the day, and biyadu yaminis, and the ritual service of it was done with your right hand. Afko in a ba'al minachulin. So to all offerings come not from tithe money, from chulin money, ubiyom, and they have to be brought during the day. Ubiyadu yaminis, and they have to be brought with the right hand. Chatas minon. How do we know the chatas has all these laws? And Rav Chisda Makra, based on the fact that the pasuk says, "V'kriv Aaron es parach chatas hashalo," and Aaron brought the bull offering as the bull as a sin offering from his own money. So what does that mean? This is by the service of Yom Kippur. So what do we learn from here? Mishalo lo mishal b'tzibur. It comes from his own funds. He has to bring his own sin offering from his own funds, not the community's. Lo mishal meiser, not from the tithe money. Bayom meiser here refers to meiser behema. Lo mishal meiser. Bayom mi biyom tzavaso nafka. How do we know that has to be brought during the day? This is derived from the fact that it says God commanded Moshe at Mount Sinai. On the day, he commanded Bnei Yisrael akrivas karbaneim Hashem and Bar Sinai. So it was on the day, and so the Gemara says, "Wait, why are we saying?" Bayom? So the Gemara is asking the question: why do we say that the Brisa said that learned out from the Chatos? We learned it out not from the Chatos, from the fact that it says Bayom Tzavaso. The Gemara says Kedei Naspa. The Brisa, when it says we learn out from the sin offering, it's not meant to be taken literally. It's just Kedei Naspa. It's like he said it in passing. That it's not serious. Biyadu Yaminis. What does it mean with his right hand? Made the Rabbi Bar Chana Nafka. He learned that from Rabbi Chana. Dam Rabbi Chana Marashalkash called Malcolm Shenemar Etzba. Gemara says, why are you saying you learn out Rabbi Bar Chana? Why are you learning out the right hand from the Chatas? Don't we learn out from Rabbi Bar Chana, who said, wherever it says Etzba v'Kuhuna, Einu El Yamin, wherever it says the finger, and it says Kuhuna, that means it has to be with the right hand. The Gemara gives the same answer, Kedei Naspa, meaning to say, again, the source that was from the sin offering is not meant to be taken literally. Ibai same, or alternatively, Several could the Rabbi Shimon the Amar Etzba will buy Kuhuna buy Etzba. And if it just says Etzba, then it requires the right hand. But wherever it says Kuhuna, then it requires by Etzba. It would not require the right hand. You would need to write Etzba in order to require it. Okay, what do we learn out from the Asham? Asham atzmosam mutarim afko atzmosam mutarim. Just like the Asham, the bones are permitted. Also, all the offerings you can use their bones. And what can you do with their bones? So Rashi says you could even make. Rashi says lasos mein kelim. You can make utensils from the bones of the carbon asham. You turn into like bone china. I don't know about bone china. That's not bones, but you can make into spoons and whatever. Yeah, you're able to do it. Afko, even in Ola, Rashi says. So the Gemara says, Amarava Pshitulate. So now Rava says, it's obvious to me that dam chatas lamata, v'dam ola lamala. So we said that the chatas blood, if it gets on your carbon, you need to get rid of it. But let's say it's obvious to me, says Rava, it's obvious to me that if the blood of the chatas is below and the blood of the ola is above, meaning to say the chatas got on your shirt, on the Kohen's garment, and then the ola fell on top of it. Then you'd obviously have to wash it off, ton kibos, because the dam chatas is touching the garment. The blood of the sin offering is touching the garment. But by Rava, what about the following? Dam ola mata v'dam chatas amal. Let's say you have the blood of the ola touching the garment, and the blood of the chatas fell on top of that. Mao, what would be the law there? Mishum no geyahu, va no geya. Do we say that the concern is that the garment is touching, that the blood is touching the garment, and in this case, it's considered like it's touching and it requires laundering, meaning to say, because since it's touching the ola and the ola touching the garment, it's considered like it's touching. Or the concern is that it gets absorbed into the garment. In this case, it's not absorbed in because only the ola blood is absorbed in, but the chatas blood's on top. Hadar pashta, the ain tun and kibbutz. After he asked this question, he said it doesn't require laundering under those circumstances. Amar Rava, now Rava asked the following question. Pshitui dama bigdo. Since we're talking about blood on the garment, it's obvious to me that if the blood is on the garment, chotzeitz, it becomes what's called a chatzitza. What's a chatzitza? That the exactly, and so therefore, if you blood on your garment and you try to go into the mikvah, it won't be. You can't immerse in the mikvah the garment because it's has the blood on it, the chatzitza. But vim tabachu, if he's a butcher, ain't no chotitz. If he's a butcher, he doesn't mind that it's there. He doesn't mind his blood on his garment. Everybody knows the butcher's got blood on his garment. You don't think he's a Slav if he's got blood on his garment. You think he's doing his job. So then it's not a chatzitza. Rav of al bigdo, let's say, for him, if he's the butcher. Rav of al bigdo, let's say there's some grease, some fat from the animal on his garment. Chotitz, it's a chotitz. Vim mocha rava, but let's say he's a grease salesman. He's a grease monkey. Rovefu, eno chotitz. Then if he's a grease monkey, it's not chatzitza. By Rava, dam ve'rava al bigdo. Let's say there's the blood and the grease on his garment. What do we say there? Im tabachu. So the Gemara, im tabachu tepukle mishum ravav. If he's a butcher, well, it should be grease because it should be a chatzitza because of the grease. Imocher ravavu. If he's a grease salesman, tepukle mishum dam. So obviously, in both of those cases, the chatzitza either from the other one. The Gemara says no. But shicha da'avid hava ha. Let's say he's both a butcher and a grease salesman. Achad lo kapid. So maybe for one mark, he's not. For one thing, he's not. It's not a chatzitza. But if it's two, atarti kapid. But if it's two things, then maybe it's a chatzitza. So the Gemara says. Under those cases, the answer is atarti kapid. The Gemara says take it. We leave this question unresolved. We're going to leave it for when Eliyahu Hanavi comes. Tishbi Taris Kushis Manavayos. That Tishbi, Eliyahu Hanavi is going to answer that. Hadrin Olach Dam Chatas. We will return to this chapter in 7.5 years, but hopefully sooner. We'll review it and study it. And now we start the next chapter. Next chapter of the tractate is the chapter called Tavul Yom. Yeah, it's only I have the teacher's edition, so I have the other book. I have what's called the Masifta Shas, which has the best. I think it's the greatest work of scholarship. So the Mishnah now talks about the following cases. This chapter is totally new topic. This chapter talks about the portions of the Kohanim in the sacrificial food and in the hides of the sacrificial offerings, and other laws of the sacrifices about how they're divided up amongst the Kohen. So a Tvul Yom, what's a Tvul Yom? That's a Kohen who immersed in the mikvah, and he's purified, biblically speaking, but the sun did not set yet. So until the sun sets, it's not complete. And he's considered like Tameh for certain things. And for what things? What? He immersed in the mikvah, not necessarily from immersed in the mikvah, yeah, and from avatuma, but he can't eat from the truma and the kachim until the sun sets. This is the very first Mishnah in the Shas. So that's called the Tvul Yom. So he immersed in the mikvah, but it's not yet nightfall, so he can't eat the truma and the kachim. Mechusar Kippurim refers to a zav or metzora that they there are four people who are called the Mechusar Kippurim. The Zav, the Yoledes, the Zava, the Zava, and the Zava, the Yoledes, the Zav, and the Metzora. And each one of them is called Mechusar Kippurim. That means to say, even though they immersed in the mikvah and it was nightfall, nevertheless, they still are not completely permitted to enter into the temple and to eat from the kachim until they bring their sacrifices that they're going to be an atonement for them, a complete. So they're what's called Mechusar Kippurim. So therefore, there are Mechusar Kippurim. But in our case, we're only talking about the Kohanim. So that's the Zav and the Metzora. So that is a woman who gave birth. Einon Cholkim, they don't get a portion of the Kachim, so even though they could theoretically eat it that evening, because that evening is when they're allowed to eat, but since at the time the carbon was slaughtered and sacrifices, they were not able to eat it, they don't get a portion of that. Onain, what's an Onain? An Onain is one whose 7 closest relatives die, and he's obligated to mourn them. Nogea, he's allowed to touch the Kachim, and he doesn't make it Tameh. But the Chachamim nevertheless said the Eino Makriv. He does not. He does not. The Chachamim said he can't eat from it, but he also he's not. He's not allowed to serve in the temple, so he doesn't bring an offering, and he can't eat it, and so therefore, Eino Cholek. He doesn't get a portion of Chola Erev, even though he wouldn't be an Onin that night. He still doesn't get a portion to eat later. Bali Mumin, this is a Kohen who has a defect. Bein Bali Mumin over him, whether it's a blemish, a physical defect that will heal soon, or Bein Bali Mumin Kavum, or whether it's not going to heal, Cholkin va'ochlin avolo makribin. They get a portion and they eat it, but they don't bring the offering. This is based upon the fact that it says in Emor, Kol ish asher bo mum mizera Aaron HaKohen, lo yigash la'akriv et Yishei Hashem. And so we're going to discuss this on tomorrow's daf. So the Baalei Mumim get a portion, but they can't serve. Whoever is not able to serve does not get a portion of the meat, except for the Baalei Mumim. So whoever doesn't get a portion of the meat doesn't get a portion of the hides. And even a Kohen was tummy when the blood was sprinkled. Vitar b'shat hekter chalavim, but when it was offered on the altar, he was tahor. Eino cholik b'basar. He does not get a portion of the meat. Shenemar makriv estam hashlamim v'esachilav b'nei Aaron tiyeh shok hayamin l'manah. So it says the one who brings the dam hashlamim and the chilav b'nei Aaron lo tiyeh shok hayamin l'manah. So the pasuk says this. Sprinkling of the blood. So somebody who was not tahor when the blood was sprinkled is not going to be considered like those who brought it, and he does not get a portion of it. You had a question, Bill? Okay, so that's today's daf, but we did it